The main body of sources that historians of Henry VIII's reign use are what are known as the State Papers, and they're in the National Archives at Kew. They're slightly misnamed because in part they are the state papers of the English government. They're letters that came in to Henry or to his ministers or to his privy councillors, either sent by local officials in England or sent by foreign governments, or they're drafts of outgoing letters from the English government. But they also include, for example, the private archives of leading royal ministers, which were confiscated after their death, in particular for the 1530s, the papers of Thomas Cromwell, who was organising the dissolution of the monasteries for Henry, much involved in the politics around the rise and fall of Anne Boleyn, and so on. So there's that whole body of material. There's also the similar correspondence of foreign governments. So, for example, the reports of Spanish ambassadors in England back to the Habsburg government in Spain or in the Low Countries, the reports of French ambassadors from the English court. They give us a running commentary on what's happening in English politics, and so to some extent they're reports of observers just explaining what they've seen at the English court or what they've heard. To some extent they're the reports of interviewers. These are people who will go and talk to the Duke of Norfolk about various issues in English domestic politics or in international politics, and will then report back to their government on what the Duke of Norfolk's views on this or that subject are. Those sorts of bodies of material are both much stronger for Henry VIII's reign and Elizabeth's reign than they are for Henry VII's reign. So we'll always have more difficulties investigating the politics and the policy of Henry VII's reign than we do Henry VIII's reign, where the paperwork is just much more voluminous. And similarly for Elizabeth's reign, we have, not in the National Archives, but in other repositories like the British Library or Hatfield House, we have the private papers of William Cecil, who was Elizabeth's chief minister for much of her reign. Then the third big body of material we've got is that generated by the Howards themselves, their private estate accounts. There's nothing much by way of correspondence from the Howards, unlike some other families from the time. You might think of the Lisle letters, which is the big volume of correspondence of Arthur Plantagenet Viscount Lisle, who's Henry VIII's governor of Calais. But what we have got for the Howards are a certain number of estate accounts, some household account material, the accounts for one of their parks in East Anglia of who they sent gifts of deer to, things like that. So we've got scraps that we can put together to try to make sense of how the Howards ran their affairs from the inside, as well as these various different ways of looking at them from the outside.